In this video, we continue our work with fractions. This time we're going to talk about addition and subtraction of fractions. Now, in our last video, we worked on multiplication and division of fractions. And for those operations, we don't need a common denominator. We could multiply straight across. We could divide by using our reciprocal, and no common denominator was needed. But when you add and subtract fractions, we need to have a common denominator. In this video, our fractions do have common denominators. So take a look at our first example. It says 1/6 plus 1/6. So notice that the denominator is 6. Both fractions have the same denominator. So to add fractions that have the same denominator, you're going to keep the denominator and you're going to add the 1 plus 1 to make it a 2. So our answer is 2/6, but you always want to check and see if you can reduce the fraction further if there's a common factor. And the 2 and the 6 have a 2 in common, don't they? So we're going to divide. We're actually going to do a division. We'll divide the 2 by the 2 and the 6 by the 2. And so we're going to get 1/3. So 1/6 plus 1/6 is equal to 1/3. In our next example, we're adding together two negative fractions. So as you know, when you're adding together two numbers that have the same sign, you're going to add normally, but just keep the sign as part of your answer. So here we're going to have a negative as the sign for this answer. Again, these two fractions have a common denominator of 12, which we're going to keep as part of our answer. And then we're going to add a -5 plus a -1, or 5 plus 1, since we already have the negative here in front of the fraction. So 5 plus 1 is 6. Now, this fraction can be reduced further because 6 and 12 have a 6 in common. So we're going to divide numerator by 6. That'll give us a 1. 6 divided by 6 is 1. And 12 divided by 6, which is 2. So our answer is -1/2. Now, in problem number 3, notice that even though we have our common denominator of 4, we do have a positive fraction added to a negative fraction. So in that case, we're going to keep the sign of the fraction that looks larger, right? So the 3/4 is bigger than a 1/4. So the 3 is negative. So our answer will be a negative. We're going to keep the 4 denominator, and then you're going to subtract 3 minus 1, and that gives us 2. So as you know, 1 plus a -3 is a -2. So we get a -2/4 as our answer. And again, this can be reduced by 2, right? There's a common factor. So we reduce that to a -1/2. In problem number 4, we are once again, now we're doing a subtraction. We're subtracting 3/10 minus 1/10. Again, we have a common denominator of 10, and 3 minus 1 is 2. And that reduces down by 2. 2 and 10 have a common factor of 2. So we divide 2 by 2 and get 1, and divide 10 by 2 and get 5. So 1/5. In problem number 5, notice how we're subtracting a negative number. So oftentimes when we have a subtraction of signed numbers like this, we will rewrite and we will change this sign, this subtraction sign, to a positive, and then we'll change the sign that follows to the opposite. So subtracting a negative is equivalent to adding a positive. Okay, adding the opposite, which is a positive. So now notice that this subtraction problem is now an addition problem of two positive fractions. They both have denominator 8, and then 7 plus 1, which is 8. And now 8/8, that's equal to a whole, 1 whole. So that fraction simplifies to a 1. In this problem, we are once again subtracting, and we have a -8/9 subtracting a -2/9. So we're going to once again change that subtraction to an addition, and then change the following number to the opposite, which would make it a +2/9. Now these have the same denominator of 9, and you have a negative 8 added to a positive 2, which means that our answer will be negative, and we'll subtract 8 minus 2, which will be 6. And now 6 and 9, they have a common factor of 3. So we're going to go ahead and divide 6 by 3, which gives us a negative 2, and 9 by 3, which gives us a 3. So our final answer in simplified form is negative 2/3.